Welcome back to Fabulous Creations. I'm Ron, and apparently it's baby having time in my circle of friends. Not one, not two, but 3 friends and their spouses all had babies this summer, all within about a month and a half of each other. 2 boys and a girl. I wanted to make each friend a little something to celebrate their new bundle of joy, and I came up with the idea to make a set of super personalized alphabet blocks for each baby that my friends, the parents, would also treasure. Let me start by introducing you to my 3 friends. There's Ty, Talia, and Taylor. Ty and Talia are both current coworkers, while Taylor and I met at a past job, but became great friends whilst there. Being I knew the parents so well, I thought a great way to personalize the blocks for their baby would be to include shapes and designs that were a direct nod to the parents' background and interests. Let's start with Ty's baby blocks for his new son, Pear. Ty and I work together as web developers at my 9-to-5, and he really loves Google's material design. We built a few internal apps together at Drip, the company we work at, and Ty always likes to use material design. I've grown to like it a lot too, despite being an Apple fanboy outside of work. For the non-developers out there, material design is basically just Google's design language for all things Google. If you've ever used Google Docs, Gmail, Android, or heck, even YouTube, you've seen Google's material design in action. It's completely open source and they encourage you to use it for your own apps. Part of material design is the icon toolkit available in material applications. Since Ty loves material design so much, I thought it would be fitting to use material design icons on his son's name blocks. Being that we're both web developers, I saw it even more fitting to use some of the more developer-focused icons. I like to imagine Ty someday putting a STEM twist on the old trope of the dad who wants his son to play football, except instead of football, he'll push his son towards engineering and computer science. I like to think that these blocks might help with that. But if Pear wants to be a football player someday instead, I'm sure Ty will love him just the same. Next up, there's Talia and her new daughter, Josie. Talia is a graphic designer on our marketing team and has developed a large number of illustrations found across our website and other marketing materials. Drip's brand is a really fun and playful one, and as such, the illustrations are super kid-friendly in the first place. So for Josie's blocks, I thought it fitting to use some of her mama's own illustrations on her blocks. I did have to make some modifications to the illustrations in order to make them more suited for the laser, so hopefully Talia doesn't think I butchered them. At least too much. They were originally designed with color in mind, but obviously lasers are a one-color pony, at least when it comes to wood. So I had to remove the colors and make any appropriate tweaks to determine what would be black and what would be white. There was also some detail and resolution concerns I had to address. I wanted the illustrations to have a somewhat consistent line weight across the different sizes of the blocks, so for some illustrations I had to make the lines thicker, and some I had to make thinner. This was mostly due to some of these illustrations being designed for larger applications than others in the first place. So while they may have all had the same line weight when they were different sizes, once they were scaled to the same size, they needed to be tweaked to bring them all to the same line weight. There were also a few of my favorite illustrations, like the wacky waving inflatable arm flailing tube men, for example, that were a bit too tall for the square aspect ratio of a block, that I had to tweak and shorten. All in all, despite my modifications to make them better suited to the blocks, the spirit and playfulness of Talia's original designs comes through just the same. Then finally, there was Taylor and her new son, Teddy. This one ended up being the most design heavy of the 3, but I'm super happy with how it came out. Taylor is also a designer, but her work is largely UX focused these days, so not a lot of her work is in illustrations. So even if I had access to them, like I did with Talia's since we worked together, I couldn't take illustrations she had made and adapt them to the laser like I did with Talia. Instead, I'd brainstorm for a bit and decide to go all in on a theme related to the name his parents gave him, Teddy. Bears. All kinds of bears and bear-related things. With 4 non-letter sides per block and 5 blocks total, I had to come up with 20 different bear concepts, and that proved quite the challenge. Because my specialty is in illustration work, I originally thought about purchasing stock vector illustrations, but then I realized that there would be no consistency in them if I, say, bought a panda bear illustration from one designer and a koala bear illustration from another designer. So I buckled up for the long haul and ended up doing all the illustrations myself, using lots of reference material from Google Images where necessary. Since I ended up scraping the bottom of the things associated with bears barrel, some of them ended up a little more obscure and less on the nose, but I figured that would make them more interesting. I won't spoil the references if you want to try to guess in the comments what they're supposed to be. After all the designs were made, but before lasering the designs, I had to cut the blocks to size. I selected a conveniently sized piece of hard maple from my local lumberyard that was roughly square and around the size I wanted to make the blocks anyway. All I needed to do was run it through the belt sander a few times on one side to make it fully square, then slice it up into cubes on the table saw. Whenever lasering something that involves accurately placing parts in the same spot on the laser bed, it's helpful to make a jig of sorts to line things up. In this case, I made a jig by taping an aluminum square to a piece of plywood, which I had aligned to the bottom corner of the cutting bed. I could have done this at the opposite corner of the laser bed, but it's more convenient to work towards the front of the laser where I'm sitting with something that involves as much turning and human intervention as these 6-sided blocks did. For every block, I lasered the letter on opposite faces, then the remaining 4 faces each got their own unique design. With a better setup, I could in theory have done multiple blocks at the same time, but since my blocks weren't perfectly square, despite my best efforts to the contrary, I was off by a millimeter here or there. Occasionally the design would look off-centered and I'd have to scrap it and readjust things. In a perfect world, I'd get a laser system with integrated internal cameras so that I could make sure the face design was perfectly centered each time. Oh well, a boy can dream. After all the blocks in each set were lasered, it was time to round off the harsh square edges with a 1/8" roundover bit on the router table. This way there were no sharp edges for the babies to hurt themselves on. The next step was cleaning laser residue out of the laser designs. This is normally something I don't do since I am often working with plywood, and because the burnt smell, that I actually kind of like, if I'm honest, dissipates over time. But since these were done on hardwood maple, and because there was a potential for the kiddos to be sticking these in their mouth, I figured I'd get rid of as much of it as I could. Using some dish soap, warm water, and one of the dozen spare toothbrushes that I've been gifted by the dentist over the years, I diligently scrubbed the burnt areas. Being this was one of the first times I'd lasered hard maple, I wasn't exactly sure how sturdy some of the finer details would be, but they held up just fine to my aggressive cleaning. After I was done with each set, they rested on a cooling rack so that each side could dry appropriately. I purposely avoided any sanding on the blocks until after the washing was done, as I knew that the water would cause the grain to stand up as it dried, so I didn't have to double my efforts by sanding twice. I used a large piece of sandpaper laid flat to sand the faces by circling the blocks and occasionally tapping them down to clean out the dust trapped in the design. This left some neat patterns on my sandpaper. Using a smaller strip, I was able to detail the corners and edges and make sure the rounded edge I'd created with the router didn't get sanded flat in any areas. Once they were sanded and fine dust was removed with the air compressor, it was time for the messy part, finishing. To be baby safe, they were finished with homemade butcher block conditioner, which is simply a blend of food-grade mineral oil and food-grade beeswax. I smeared a bunch on each block and left it to soak in for a few hours. After it had had a chance to soak in, I cleaned off the excess with a towel and, again, a spare toothbrush to get inside some of the finer details and get any big globs of finish out. After one last chance to dry with the excess finish removed, it was time for one of my favorite parts when giving a gift, the presentation. I used some clear cellophane bags and stacked the blocks inside, tying off each one with some twine and a personalized note to each parent. Now for better or for worse, I'm not really one to give a gift with a camera in the person's face, so I don't have any big reveal footage of me giving these to the friends. But to hopefully scratch that itch, here are some glamour shots I took with the blocks before they made their way to their final home. I hope you enjoyed this in-depth look at the process behind me making these custom baby blocks. Much like wedding signs, these are the types of projects I really love to do and put a lot of heart into, so hopefully you find value and inspiration in these types of projects. If you like this video, I sure would appreciate a thumbs up and if you subscribe to my channel. It'll let me know that this is the type of project you really enjoy watching and encourage me to make more videos like it in the future. And if you do want to see more videos like this in the future, be sure to hit the bell icon after subscribing so that YouTube notifies you when new videos come out. Until next time, cheers.